Hello, greetings. Happy day to you. We hope that you are doing well. And we are so happy that you have decided to join us today for this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program from the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We're glad that you're here on this date, June 28th. We're going to talk today. We're going to start the first of a two-part series this week and next week entitled 250 Years of Hypocrisy. If you somehow missed it, and if you did miss it, I would love to hear from you about how you were able to avoid being constantly bombarded with this propaganda. But if you missed it, July 4th, 2026 is 250 years from July 4th, 1776, which this backward empire calls its birthday, Independence Day. So 250 years of the United Snakes of America as we know it. And the next 2 days, today and next week, we're going to talk about that from the standpoint of the hypocrisy of 250 years. They constantly talk about it as if this country's the citadel of freedom and democracy. And the only thing that this country is a citadel of is creating havoc, confusion, theft, and murder on the planet Earth, and creating dysfunction among all of the people that are under the auspices of its filthy tentacles. So we're going to talk about that. Today is going to be more focused on, just understanding the consistent hypocrisy that this country perpetuates. And then next week, we're going to focus in on the Constitution of the U.S. and break down the lies in the Constitution. Everyone's always referring in this country to the Constitution as if, it's a legal and binding document. And it's not worth the paper it's printed on, or as Kwame Ture calls it, it's toilet paper. So we're going to talk about that next week. Today, we're going to again talk about the general hypocrisy of this system and what it represents. So we want to thank you again for joining us. We do, as we always do, talk about hypocrisy. We acknowledge the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. I saw some filthy, miserable loser on social media, some European woman talking about white countries. Uh, it's dangerous in white countries, said no one. And the inference of that stupid statement is that wherever European countries are, or white countries are, where white people are, they're safe. And other parts of the world, they're not safe. And the first comment was a very appropriate comment. This person wrote, I'm sure the natives of the Western Hemisphere would disagree, and I'm sure that people in Africa would disagree. And then they went on and on. And then another person was on a podcast, and the European, it was an indigenous person, and the European told them, it's black and brown people that are violent. You don't see white people attacking black and brown people on the streets. And the indigenous person told them, well, you don't yeah, the level of violence that we have is just like on the street, a fist fight or a single shooting or something. You all don't, you're right. You don't do that to us. Instead, you invade entire countries and take them over, bomb the hell out of them, and kill hundreds of thousands of people. So this is what we mean when we say hypocrisy. And certainly the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere are a clear and irrefutable example of that. And certainly our African ancestors are no less a clear and great example of that. The fact that we're here, the fact that I'm sitting here talking in English, living in the Western Hemisphere, is an irrefutable example of the contradiction of this society, that it promotes itself as a society of freedom and democracy. But yet, here I am sitting here because of the theft and murder that built up this empire. And the fact that they can call themselves democratic. There was another clip I saw with from about 30 years ago, and it was Mike Wallace talking to Minister Louis Farrakhan. And of course, yesterday, Minister Farrakhan's wife of over 50 years, Sister Khadija Farrakhan, made her physical transition. So we give respect in that manner. But in that interview from 30 years ago, Mike Wallace said that Nigeria was the most corrupt country in the world, and Farrakhan just lit into him and said, you know, you let us worry about our people. We'll work with our people. But he said the U.S. is in no position to call another country corrupt. That country at that time was 35 years old because they didn't get their independence until 1960, and the interview was in 1995. And he said, here it is, the America 200 plus years, and Nigeria, at least our people there have the right to vote, and we didn't even get that here until 50 years ago. He was saying that, and that's absolutely correct. So it's hypocrisy to say 250 years of freedom and democracy. So that's what our ancestors know. This, they lived it, they experienced it. My parents experienced it. Shakur's grandparents on both sides experienced it. They know this. We talked to them. We understood that they knew this. We've talked to plenty of Africans who have lived through this trauma for the last couple of centuries. They've known this. They understand it. There's no confusion. And I think most people know it. It's just there are people who, being able to promote this lie gives them the opportunity to create a brand where they can make some money. Or some people just, just it's that, or they just, a lot of people haven't read a book since high school, and they're my age and they haven't read a book since high school. So they just don't have any clear, whatever they tell them on TV, they believe it. They don't have any way to analyze what's going on and come to their own conclusion. So that, of course, is why we're here. So we're glad that you're here to join us. And we just, as always, just introduce who we are in case you didn't know. Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored each week by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP. And the AAPRP, we're an action organization. We're engaged in organizing work, not mobilizing work. And what that means is that we believe and we are convinced that the solution for African people all over the world is Pan Africanism. And the APRP is a mass independent revolutionary political party that is fighting for Pan Africanism. And Pan Africanism, defined, is the total liberation and unification of Africa under one scientific socialist government. That is what Pan Africanism looks like. And we know that once we achieve Pan Africanism, that will address the problems we have all throughout the Americas, uh, throughout all of Africa, Europe, everywhere that African people are. And it'll also put us in a position to contribute to world peace and forward human progress. So that's what we're fighting for. And our work to achieve Pan Africanism, Kwame Nkrumah outlines in the book you see on your screen, The Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. And in that book, Nkrumah calls for the unification of all of the revolutionary Pan Africanist formations on the ground throughout the African continent who agree with the definition of Pan Africanism being one unified socialist Africa. And this is the work that we have been engaged in since the writing of this book in 1968, the almost 60 years since it's been in publication. Our work has been, our founding came from this book, and our work has been to fulfill the contents of this book. And so what we do is we're on the ground all throughout Africa fighting to build up this All African Committee for Political Coordination that Nkrumah calls for in this book, which is the unity on the central committee level of all of these Pan-Africanist formations all throughout the African continent. And so I have been one of many APRP cadre who has been fortunate to travel all throughout Africa and do this work. Have done it in Northern Africa, West Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa. And so I know that the work is happening. It's not just an idea from a book. It's not just a hope and dream from a book. It's not just people bumping their gums in front of a liquor store. It's actual work on the ground that's taking place. And it is work that will bear the fruit that will bring us this foundational objective of Pan-Africanism. And this program is one of many programs we do, Our Ancestors' Voices. It's hosted each week by myself, Ajamu, and my biological, ideological daughter, Dr. Shakura Umi. So to get us started, 250 years of hypocrisy, I'll turn it over to Shakura.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. Hello, hello. So let's jump right into it. giving praise and homage to our comrade Kwame Ture, as well as Malcolm X. You, of course, know, or maybe you don't, Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, right? One of our legendary mentors, founders, and just existence actually for the U.S. chapter of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Without him speaking to Kwame Nkrumah, and Nkrumah saying to him, I need you to go to the U.S., the diaspora, and to start our chapters there, Baba Ajamu and I would not be speaking to you through these platforms, at least not at this highest ideological level. So we owe everything to our comrade KT or Kwame Ture. And of course, Malcolm X is nothing less of that. So it's important for us to think of the quote, capitalism doesn't lie some of the time. It lies all of the time. Even if capitalism tells the truth, it's the result of a double lie. And I really think that Kwame Ture said that best. If you really break that down, what he's saying that there is always an assumption that you should not be trusting the capitalist system because the information that you're receiving from it is not based on humanity. It's not based on truth. It's not based on value. It's not based on ethics. It's not based on principle. It's not based on integrity. It's based on the best interest of the capitalist people, which most of the time is not going to honor truth and integrity and validity and evidence. It's not going to value that. As I said, it's going to value what is in the best interest of the capitalist system. And so Kwame Ture even goes on to say, not even if you were to measure how many times the capitalist system has lied, it wouldn't even be some of the time, it would be all of the time. And in the event that you do receive the truth from capitalism, it's only because it's trying to cover up a double lie that it already told. I think that is so well said. So well said. And so we have to kind of think deeply about that. And if you all tuned in, I think it was 2 weeks ago, not last week, but the week before, we were talking a little bit about this same topic. And I mentioned to you, it's really important to think about how those lies are constructed and how they are distributed, right? Because it's also important to kind of connect how the propaganda is a very efficient system that can disseminate and distribute those lies, right? And so, if you remember from 2 weeks ago, I mentioned the last time I went to get a manicure, she handed me the book of colors, and I still can't believe that propaganda has found a way to edge itself even into a nail salon, for crying out loud, to commemorate 250 years. Because I personally would see no connection between the colors of the book choice and 250 years of the U.S. celebrating its birthday, so supposedly, right? Um, Especially if the colors are not just focusing on the typical colors of red, white, and blue. And they weren't. There were all kinds of colors in there: yellow, green, purple, right? Pink. There were all kinds of colors in there. So I was very, very confused when I opened this book and I'm like, there's an eagle and it's red, white, and blue and it's America 250. And I'm like, really? I'm just trying to find a color. I don't understand why this is connected. So this is my point, you all, though. Like, you can't leave any crevice untouched. You have to propagandize. You have to indoctrinate. You have to um, shift the consciousness. You have to work overtime to shift the consciousness. You have to be consistent with trying to shift that consciousness. And it's important for us to kind of like break that down because that's the system that we are working against. We have to understand exactly what kind of tools and skills and intentions and abilities and capacities that we are up against. We need to understand the oppressor better than they understand themselves, because understanding that means that we are in a better position to know what all we need to be fighting against and how we need to be more sensitive to the idea of just how many lies are out there that need to be debunked and need to be demystified, right? And so this is kind of how this is connecting in. And then if we were to cite Malcolm X, quote, if you were American citizens, they wouldn't need to pass legislation to provide you your rights, end quote. And I really think that one is self-explanatory, but just in case it's not clear, what he was saying was if people who are oppressed did in fact be deemed as American citizens, if that were the case, If they were oppressed, but they were also seen as American citizens, then we wouldn't need to go through policy reform. We wouldn't need to go, march at the Capitol. We wouldn't need to be looking at what new policies need to be in place. We wouldn't be affecting legislation. We wouldn't be doing all these things, especially when we think that it's making a difference, because none of that would be necessary. Because if you were seen and perceived and classified and respected as an American citizen, you wouldn't need all that legislation to prove that you are, in fact, an American citizen. The legislation wouldn't be necessary because the social perception would be enough. That's what he was saying. People would already take into account that you are, in fact, an American citizen. And because of that, you deserve respect. So there wouldn't be a need to have any of these other things change because you would already be valued in society. That's what he's saying. And we know that that is a very powerful statement because it is not true. We often talk about, the perception of how we're navigating these spaces, whether it's under capitalism, whether it's because of white supremacy, if it's because of patriarchy, homophobia, ableism, classism. Like, these are all different ways that we know that people are not being valued, not being taken seriously. Islamophobia, xenophobia. We know that there's misogyny. We know that there is transphobia. Like, we can go on, you all. So Malcolm, very, very wise to say this, because any of those folks who are suffering from any of that systemic and institutionalized oppression are very much not in a position to be seen as American citizens, and therefore they're not to be seen as deserving of respect, as deserving of value, as deserving of the time of day to even walk this earth and to not be ridiculed with violence and destruction. We wouldn't have to even question that. It would already be there set in stone. And I just want to highlight that, last week I was having technical issues and I was very upset about that. So, before the FBI silences me again, I just want to say to my dad, happy belated Father's Day. This is the gift that I was trying to show you all last week. I'm so upset that I couldn't do this last week, but it's happening now, okay? So if you can see, this is a picture of me. We had an event a couple of weeks ago at the Black Panther Museum in Oakland, California. And there is a picture, if you can see, of Dr. Huey P. Newton, right? He did receive his honorary doctorate degree. And obviously, you know that I graduated last year because you've been with us on this journey. So you also know that I've earned my PhD. And so my dad took a picture of me standing in front of that, pointing to Dr. Huey P. Newton. And I wanted to print it out and frame it because I am so thankful to Dr. Huey P. Newton. I'm thankful to Shirley Graham Du Bois. I'm thankful to Geronimo Pratt. I'm thankful to Yuri, our comrade Yuri, Kamiyochi. I'm thankful to Kamiyana, excuse me. I'm thankful to so many different comrades who have used um, the diasporic, but really the Western practice of academia to pursue higher education, and then turned around and used the skills that they have obtained through those pathways to advance the struggles for people everywhere. I am so thankful to all of them for that. You can easily look up, and I left so many people out. We have Kwame Nkrumah, right? We have so many other people that are not even coming to me right now who have pursued higher education, graduated. Geronimo Pratt pursued his education through the U.S. military system and then came out of that and then used the skills that he was taught to then teach and educate our folks about self-defense and tactical training, especially from an ideological and a physical standpoint. So yes, I owe everything to Dr. Huey P. Newton, as well as Shirley Graham Du Bois getting her master's in media and medicine so that she could go on, not medicine, but media and journalism, so that she could go on and start the broadcast system, the radio and television system in Ghana, just to name a few. And so my point is, like, this is why it's all connected, you all. And even if with us talking about America 250 and why it's a bunch of nonsense, we still have to remember why we're doing what we're doing. These systems that we are functioning and fighting against, whether it's the United States, whether it's the academy, whether it's capitalism, it doesn't matter. The propaganda is so strong, they will communicate and teach you that you don't need to fight. You just need to accept. And you cannot let that happen. You have to continue resisting. And I think even more than that, they want to teach you that you need to accept, because then you won't need to be considered a threat to them anymore, so that they can know that they can just achieve their goal because you won't be stopping them. And that's unacceptable if you give up in that regard. You're here listening to us because you know deep down that there's more that you want to be doing. You might not have the tools or know the knowledge of how to do it, but you know that there is more that is driving you to come to these seminars every week. And you also know that this system and the world that we're living in is messed up. You know that. So because you know that, we have to keep fighting. We have to keep fighting. And sometimes that means, taking a break to take care of ourselves, whatever that means, but we have to keep fighting. We cannot give up. There is so much at stake here, and I will keep saying it until I have no breath in my body. The best example that we can give you of why it's important to keep fighting is we can look to our comrades in Cuba. We can look to our comrades anywhere who have fought off the colonizers or even neo colonizers. We can look to them for how they've achieved independence. We can look to them for how their economies have flourished and been able to help people survive. And we can ask ourselves, do we want to trust capitalism where it has been telling us for years that socialism does not work, but yet we see what Cuba has been able to do? The fact that I was able to go there, and even though they had a coffee bean shortage, they allowed us to have coffee 3 times a day if we wanted it, you all, because they sacrificed their own needs of getting their own coffee made so that we could have coffee for the 42 brigadistas who went there for 12 days. That says a lot when you are sacrificing your own benefits so that others can benefit from that, even with you not having a guarantee of where you're going to get your coffee beans. But if you let the rest of the world tell you they don't have coffee beans, they don't have anything, and they're not doing well, well, no, they're not doing well. But this is why we need to stand with them so that they can do better. This is why we need to donate. This is why we need to read up on Cuba. This is why we need to go if we can. This is why we need to support the Venceremos Brigade. We need to do everything we can because Cuba is the best example of what happens when you don't support capitalism and how you can manage and maintain not supporting capitalism under a 60 plus year brigade, excuse me, embargo, and still be able to do what you need to do. That says a lot about your functionality. That says a lot about how you have managed to get through that blockade for 60 plus years. And it's not without consequence, as we've already said. Next slide, please. But this is why we need to stand with them so that they can get the resources they need, because we can help them by sending medicine. We can help them by sending resources, paper, rice, paper clips, pencils. We can do that. We can talk to people who are going in person. We can donate to the Venceremos Brigade. This is how we do that. This is also how we resist America 250, because America 250 does not stand with socialism. And we have said time and time again in numerous seminars that socialism is the key. Socialism is the key. The best way you can think about that is understanding that there is more humane systems out there than capitalism, which is why you don't have to accept the system. You don't have to accept it, but you're going to have to do the research to figure out what is so tragic about this system and why socialism should be given more of a chance, especially why the oppressor is so afraid of it. Why are they afraid of you learning about socialism? Ask yourself that. Why are they afraid of you going to a socialist country? Ask yourself that. What's the worst that can happen? Is you'll get there and you'll see that humanity actually survives and is actually thriving in some ways because they actually have more humanity in their bones and in their soul than a lot of us do in our fingernails, because they actually know how to treat people with respect from a grounded and rooted level. Oh, yeah, it's going to change you. It's going to change you. I've been back for 8 months and I'm still impacted by that trip. I don't think I will ever forget going to Cuba. I will never, ever forget that. And I thank you all again for supporting me to do that. So, remember, this is how we do that. This is how we resist. We should also think that we're always talking to you all about our All African People Revolutionary Party institutions, right? So we talked to you about African Liberation Day, huge institution that we celebrate within our organization. We talked to you about Pan African Women's Day, another huge institution that we have. And just give a quick shout out. We have some in-person Pan-African Women's Day events coming up, and we also have the international broadcast that's coming up. So stay on the lookout for those that are coming up in the future. But those are really big institutions for us. If you're in the Oakland area, you might have heard about our International Women's Day event that we had earlier this year in March, right? And then we have a sanctions event that's coming up in October. I mean, we are doing these institutions, you all. Not to say that we don't even have other sub events that are happening even outside of that. So those are our institutions, right? Promoting Juneteenth, things like that. And we also are trying to be more aware of other institutions from our comrades so that we can support them on their journeys, whatever the institutions are for the Palestinian people, the institutions for the indigenous people. We've done seminars on Thanksgiving and things of that nature. So this is what that comes to look like, you all. And the best way you can think about it is if the US is promoting something because we know the US lies, that's probably not something that we want to promote, and vice versa. Like that's really the best way to think about it. It's pretty simple when you think about it like that. So if the US is telling you that you should be supporting July 4th, you should think deeply about that. Why? What's in it for you, and how has that helped your ancestors and your comrades and your family and friends? How has that helped you to celebrate that day? What has that gained you in your life as a person, as an individual, as a person of society, whatever that looks like, right? July 4th is one of the US capitalist institutions, right? It represents values, but what are the values? I would argue injustice is a huge one. I would argue injustice is a huge value under July 4th because what we're saying is the Constitution, which really can be easily used as toilet paper if you ask yourself, like, what's the purpose of it and what integrity does that document hold? None. So you might as well use it for some toilet paper, but you might even, risk clogging the toilet if you use it. So be careful if you do that. But, this toilet paper constitution, it wasn't even written with the segments, the larger segments, I would say, of the population in mind. It wasn't even written with people in mind who were going to benefit from that document. That was never the intention of that document. So it's strange when people say, and they talk today about what the forefathers intended, but they didn't intend it though. They didn't have you in mind. They didn't have me in mind. They didn't even have some people that look like them, but still have a lower class bracket in mind because they didn't make enough money to matter. So if none of us were in mind, then how was the document intended for us? How was the document written to keep us in the forefront of that? That doesn't make any sense. And this is why you have to like break things down and unpack things and think critically. This is why you have to do that. So the forefathers intended for you, if you are an African, to continue to be a slave. And I would argue, even if you're not an African, they would still want you to be without freedom if you are Palestinian. They would want you to be without land and without freedom if you are indigenous, and wiping out thousands and thousands of your people so that you can continue to fall in with the colonial rule of what a new indigenous person is supposed to represent in today's day and age, right? Continuing the colonial rule of Britain over Ireland. That's by design. That's what the forefathers intended so that they could continue to be in charge. They want to make sure that Europe and Israel and the US have all the power ever. That's what imperialism is. And so, kind of thinking more on a connected level of that, we can think about just how these entities have been able to do that, you all. They have found other countries that they wanted to control. They have taken over their resources. They've completely obliterated their military so that these countries weren't able to fight back. And then they've completely tainted their economic systems. And so this is like what imperialism is looking like and how it's connected to America 250 and what that means for the United States, what that means for all of the processes of how these institutions have come about, and what this big institution next week is supposed to truly represent. But again, like we would argue, it's rooted in evil. We would argue it's rooted not in a space of joy and of humanity, and of course not, because that's not what the U.S. stands for. I will close with this quote that I am roughly paraphrasing. Baba Ajamu has it hanging over his computer in his room, and it's by Kwame Ture. And he basically says, if you want to have, if you are thinking of navigating with people and you have humility and respect and, integrity, that's fine. But The problem is you can't do that when the person you're up against has none of those values themselves. And then he goes on to say in the quote, that would be like you holding integrity with the United States, but the United States doesn't have a conscience. It doesn't have a consciousness. So you're holding integrity and humility and empathy and all of these things with a system that is never, ever going to see you on that regard. They're going to see you for a savage that you are, and they're going to go for your jugular. Meanwhile, you're trying to show them empathy and kindness and respect and egalitarianism and humanity, and none of that is going to work. You have to figure out, like, do you have a consciousness? And if you do, then maybe I can try to talk to you. But if not, then we have to go with what we know, and what we know is resistance. Because the United States has never had a consciousness when it stole any of our lands. It never had a consciousness when it stole actual people from the lands. It never had a consciousness when it killed people or violated them sexually. It never had a consciousness when it colonized people and stole all of their education and language and culture and resources, values, beliefs, morals, obligations. All of that was wiped away. And then dare we try to practice those things, we were beaten in some cases to death. In some cases to death, just because we wanted to be who we were. So, no, you cannot hold a consciousness with someone who has no humanity. That's not going to work. So we're going to have to understand how these institutions are rooted in evil and increase our political education so we can do just that. Ashe.
Ashe, obrigada, Santi Sana, Madasi. Thank you very much. I love that picture. That's a wonderful picture. I can't wait to see it in person. And let's just continue on. Thank you for that. That's these types of presents for these days are the only thing that matter, right? That's what means something, way more than any kind of material thing. It's all about dignity. So that's very much appreciated. So let's talk about this notion that there is dignity in identifying with America or the United States, right? So, what is meant by dignity? I think we have to define it because we don't practice it. So, I really question whether many of us have any understanding of what it means. When we say dignity, what we're talking about is our ability to represent ourselves with integrity, courage, and with truth, regardless of the consequences. That's dignity. That's what it is. So dignity doesn't mean, well, I'll just do whatever the slave master wants me to do so I don't hurt my job. No, that's you don't have any dignity if you do that. Dignity is not, I'll say whatever I need to say to protect myself. That's not dignity. Dignity is that everything we do based in principles of honesty and justice, regardless of the consequences. So today, the US is on top of the world. And I mean, it's the best in the world at nothing but negative criteria. Is it the best? It's the best at theft and murder, which makes sense because that's how the country was founded, on theft and murder. I'm sitting here because of the theft part. And the murder is against my ancestors and the indigenous people and anyone who had the audacity to stand up against empire. So there's no that should clearly explain why today this country is number one in gun deaths. It's not even close. It's number one in gun deaths by far of any other place on the planet Earth. There are an estimated 100 guns. Oh, excuse me, I'm allergic to capitalism. There are an estimated 100 guns for every person that lives in this backward society. And oh boy, woo, the capitalist system. And there are 350 million people here. So that tells you how many guns are floating around in this society. And there isn't even a comprehensive study on how to use them safely or why they exist or any of that. So of course it's going to be number one. It's number one per capita in incarceration. And a lot of those incarcerations, approximately 50% is estimated by justice legal organizations that are fighting for justice in the legal system, in the judicial system. These folks say that as many as 50% of the people who've been convicted of crimes didn't commit the crime. So this is a class question. This is a question of privilege as to why people are arrested and convicted and why they're in prison. And this is important, especially for you dumbass racists out there and you graham cracker coons who support these dumbass racists, because they're constantly reiterating the same broken ass, tired talking point that we commit 50% of the crime. No, we're convicted because we're over policed and there's disparate sentencing. And so many of you are so stupid, you can't understand that. And I'm talking to the racists out here that listen to this program and then want to send all the hate mail. You're so stupid. You're boring. I'm not even entertained by you anymore. So I'm not even going to answer you because you're too goddamn stupid. And then when I say that, they resort to threats. Well, then we're going to do this to you. Well, then come on and do it, God damn it. Come on and do it. Like, we don't live our lives in fear like you do. Not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of anything. The only thing I am afraid of is not standing up to scum like you. So this is an immoral society. It was built on immorality, and it exists today based on immorality. And the people who support this society are only doing that because they have an agenda. And that agenda is they see this society as a land of resources and potential opportunities for them. So they understand that in order to have the opportunity to achieve those objectives, they have to stand in line with the backward principles of the society so that they can reap benefits from that. And on various levels, continued oppression depends upon acceptance of these values. So here you have these people like these so-called foundational Black Americans, and I've struggled with a number of them. There are some of them who they legitimately, I don't agree. We certainly disagree with them, but they have they are legitimately sincere in their position, in that they have this position that African people in the US have a unique experience. They have no evidence of that. They can't prove that. When I talk to them, and they don't know anything about our people's experience outside of the US. So I don't know how you could adopt a position like that when you haven't even done the study to be able to make a comparative analysis. And I'm talking about the good ones. I'm talking about the ones that are sincere in their analysis. But a lot of them are not sincere. A lot of them are just hoes for a payday. So they've clung to this African in America or Black American or whatever the hell it is, and they're using that around this question of reparations. They're willing to sell out to the slave master for some money. And so that's what it's all about to a lot of these people. Again, not all of them, but a lot of them, that's what this is about. And so these are the type of people who provide an assist to the US capitalist system because they're justifying it, and they're doing it in as a method of where they're willingly or unwillingly betraying the sacrifices of our people. And so that's why we say again that any acceptance of this country's principles and what this country represents is a betrayal to humanity. Any adoption of American in your identity, whether you're African American, Mexican American, Arab American, white American, it doesn't matter. Martian American, dumbass American, whatever it is, any acceptance of American in your identity is the equivalence of accepting white supremacy, accepting oppression. When you call yourself an American, you are consciously or subconsciously accepting and justifying and normalizing the oppression of millions of people. And that's where the hypocrisy comes in. Because this country is only wealthy because it's the greatest thief in human history. Everything this country has, they've gotten from stealing from the planet. I mentioned at the beginning, the man was talking about black people are violent and brown people are violent, and the indigenous brothers said, well, white people they're not necessarily going to rob an individual on the streets. They'll rob a whole country. They'll steal all the resources. This is it right here. Like you're accessing the internet right now. I don't care what kind of dumbass position you may have. I'm talking to the racists and the graham cracker coons that support them. You wouldn't even be able to have internet if it wasn't for theft from Africa. So everything this backward society has, it has through theft and murder. I mean, look what happened after World War II, how the U.S. crafted neo-colonialism in Africa as African countries began to get their independence. This was the movement that influenced the U.S. civil rights movement. Quiet as that's kept. So this is what happened. And so their strategy to ensure that real independence in Africa would never happen was to craft the narrative of neocolonialism, where they put Negroes in positions of power and they were able to set up these Negroes so that they serve the interests of the colonizing nations, of the capitalist countries, and not the interests of the masses of people in the African country that had gained its quote unquote independence. And that's so important to understand because this is still the case today. Neocolonialism is dominant all throughout Africa. And many of us, we don't have the lens to detect neocolonialism. So we see someone like Ado in Ghana or Ramaphosa in Azania or what you call South Africa, and all the others, the one in Rwanda, Kagame, and we look at these people and they look like us. And so, oh, yeah, this is why we always say individual representation in the capitalist system is not the equivalent of progress. Individual representation within the capitalist system is not the equivalent of progress. The only way to evaluate progress is what is the condition of the masses of the people. So we cannot take Kagame, we cannot take Ramaphosa, we cannot take Otto, we cannot take Barack Obama and equate that to collective progress on behalf of the African masses, because clearly only a fool would try to argue that we have had collective progress. So this is neocolonialism. These are the faces of neocolonialism. All those people represent the interests of international capital. You cannot even make a logical argument that they represent the interests of African people more than they do international capital. You can't make that to me. I'll shut you down in seconds if you try to make that argument. You can't do it because it's not real. It's not based in reality. So 250 years of elevating capital above people and punishing any and everyone who stands against it through the methods that they use in this backward cesspool: voter suppression, political repression, killing opponents, mindless propaganda, mass incarceration, mindless propaganda masquerading as curriculum in the school systems. This is how they do it. And yet they can, because of their success with perpetuating this backwardness, they can stand here today without even flinching and say, well, this is a free and democratic country. And most of us do not have the ammunition to effectively refute that. So we say nothing. And by saying nothing, we unconsciously go along with their agenda. And that's what they depend on. That's why it's so important to stand up and speak out. And if you don't have the information to speak out, then get it. Join an organization that has a political education process, like the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And if you don't want to join us, join another organization that has the same thing, or start one and create it, and we'll help you create it. But that's the only way that we can combat this backwardness. We can't do it by thinking that just if you vote in the right cracker, graham cracker, that's going to solve anything. We've been doing that for the last 60 plus years. And what do we have to show for it? Even when you do that and there's an electoral gain, a year or two later, they come along and erase it. And so we keep doing this back and forth thing. We're talking about voter suppression in 2026. They passed the um, 13th and 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution in the 1700s that were supposed to initiate the process of giving us the right to vote, and it didn't do it. And that's why they had to pass the Voting Rights Act from our pressure against them. Otherwise, that wouldn't have happened in 1965. And then that didn't do it. Now in 2026, we're still talking about our ability to vote. We're still talking about this for the last 300 years. And some of you want to tell us that if we don't just continue talking about this for another 300 years and playing the same backward ass game to get it, that we're the problem. And we're looking at you like you need to take your medication. You must really be out of your damn mind. There's clearly a better pathway for us to get the respect that we need. And it doesn't come by going through the master system. So the people of the U.S. are used as unwitting pawns in the U.S. strategy of worldwide domination. And you are an unwitting pawn. So what you should do right now is raise your hand in the air and say, I'm a hoe. I'm a happy ass hoe. Hoe. Ho, I'm a hoe. I'm a happy ass hoe. Ho, ho, I'm a hoe. I'm a happy ass hoe. Because that's exactly what each and every one of us is. Because we pay taxes to this backward ass system and we don't do anything to stop the fact that 50% of that money that they collect from us goes towards the US military. That's half the budget in this country. And they submit their propaganda, and most of us are so goddamn stupid that when someone has the audacity to suggest that maybe we should have free health care and free education, well, where is the money going to come to pay for that? Well, no other country in the world spends 50% of its budget on killing people. So they have money for health care and education, but it doesn't exist here because too many of us here are too stupid to understand that you don't wake up in the morning saying, you know what I need today to make my life complete? I need an intercontinental ballistic missile. I need a neutron bomb. I need these types of things. You never in your life wake up saying you need those things. But they have convinced you to work against your own interests. So you sit up there to, well, we don't have the money to pay for education. I'll oppose free, no education, no college tuition because we don't have the money. No, because your money is tied up in bombing Iran, bombing Yemen, bombing the Palestinian people by giving welfare to the Zionist state of Israel, providing welfare to the backward forces in Rwanda who are bombing the hell out of the Congo, bombing Sudan, giving your tax dollars to U.S. police forces to oppress and exploit African people and indigenous people all over this country. That's where your money is. And a lot of you are fine with that because you don't have the backbone to stand up and do anything about it. And that's the reason why we're in this situation that we're in right now. And we got to do that. Like they were, I remember years ago, the picture on the screen talking about Ferguson, Missouri. We were doing security for a Black Lives Matter pro. They used to, in Portland, they would go to the restaurants in the gentrified neighborhood, and the Europeans would be in there around this time of day having brunch or whatever the hell they have. And we would burst in there, 20, 30 of us, and they would start talking about to people about saying the names of all the Africans who have been killed. And most of these Europeans, you know, they're so uh, corrupt in their own values, they would just sit there and listen. And my job there was to prevent people from acting crazy. And so a couple of times, you know, Europeans got up and they tried to come over, and you know, a lot of people ended up on the ground when they tried to do that. And one time, the guy was he was saying he was asking me, are you all gonna say?" He was doing it sarcastically. "You all gonna say hands up, don't shoot?" And you know, I don't know if they were going to say that because I'm not a part of Black Lives Matter. I wasn't a part of Black Lives Matter, but I told him no, I don't say that. I say hands straight, shoot straight. That's what I say. I don't say that. So I'm not going to say that. He's like, "You what?" I'm like, "Yeah, we have dignity. We have a right to defend ourselves. If you come out and attack us, we're gonna try to put you in your grave. We have every human right to do that. We don't. Well, that's against the law." I'm like, "Well, so slavery was for the law, was legal. So obviously, this country's laws, like, we can't take that seriously. We have to do what's in the best interests of humanity. That's our responsibility to do that." Y'all gotta keep this in mind. Number one in incarcerations, number one in gun deaths, number one in mass shootings, number one in domestic violence. That's what this country is number one. These are the things that this country is the best in the world at. When it comes to the things that matter, like education, US is far down the list. Despite having more resources to educate people than any society in human history, the US is like 50th in the world in education. That's a disgrace. Healthcare, way down the list on that. Taking care of the elderly, way down the list. Having resources to take care of people who don't have the capacity to take care of themselves, way down the list. All of the things that matter, that are important, this country is terrible in. The only thing it's number one in is theft, murder, and lying to justify that. So when you go out there next Saturday and you got your red, white, and blue on, or you're around people that do, and you don't have the courage to say anything about it, you're the goddamn problem. You're the problem. Don't think you can just come here and shake your head and that absolves you. You're the problem. You're the problem if you're doing that. We have got to get some backbone, and stand up against this nonsense. This is unacceptable. It's 20. When are you going to do it? In 40, 55? The year 40, 55, I grew a backbone and I was ready to stand up and do something about this injustice. The time is now. I'm sick of this because people be on. Well, if it was slavery now, you wouldn't do a damn. If it was slavery now, the master would whip your black ass and you would get out there and pick that cotton. You would break the record picking cotton. Because if you're not doing anything now, you would have not done anything then. The people who would have resisted then are the people who are resisting now. The people that would have been house slaves now are the people who would have been house slaves then. And there's nothing that anybody can say that can make any of us who are actually out here doing our best to do the work believe any different. Nothing at all. So, what 250 years really means is we owe our future generations so much more, you all, than what we are providing to them right now. We owe them the opportunity to have a quality education, to have comprehensive and quality health care, and to have true democracy, and for them to work and the labor of their work to go towards ensuring that those things are provided to them. That's what we owe them. And we owe them a true democracy where people have a voice, but their voice is one where they have the opportunity, the resources, and the apparatus to make the correctness in their voice become a reality. And you don't have any of that here. So, how do we get what we deserve? How do we achieve that? How do we get it? Is it just through voting? Is that all we have to? Clearly, that's not true. We've been voting in this backward society for going on 70 years, and we don't have anything to show for it. All we have is individual people in positions. We don't even have a way to hold the system accountable to serve our interests once we elect these people. I mean, doing something the same way over and over and expecting a different result, you all know that's the definition of insanity. And that's what we keep doing with voting. We don't even have sense enough to organize mass movements to support the voting work that we do. If we did that, I would have a lot more respect for it. But right now, you just telling me that the solution is just voting for a cracker or a graham cracker. That's insane to me. And I would tell you, like, you got to get your medicine checked, get your levels regulated or something, because that something is off with you. If you still believe in 2026 that is by itself is how we're going to make the progress we need, that is ludicrous. Okay, so by creating false identities, saying we're not from Africa, we have no connection to Africa, is that going to move us forward? I mean, I'm telling you right now. And so when it happens, just remember where you heard it first. All of this BS about we're not African, it has its life expectancy is another year or two at the most, and then that'll go away. We've always had this. The capitalist system has always imposed all this backwardness on us. This is not the first time. We're Asiatic black people. We're all of these other things. We're everything except African. Now it's we're foundational black Americans. We're American descendants of slaves. It's always something. And I'm telling you right now, we have another year or two, and then that one will pass. The only one that has sustained the test of time is the truth, you all. We're African people. We're connected to Africa more now than ever. That is the truth. That's why that has continued to exist for centuries. And it'll continue to exist because it's the direction we need to go in. Is it just faith? Is that the way that we make it forward? Clearly, we've been the most faithful people in this backward ass cesspool for centuries. So clearly, that by itself, when the doctrine of the faith is dictated by our enemies, that is clearly not going to work for us. The faith has to be connected to principles of justice, whether it's liberation theology, whether it's understanding revolutionary Pan-African culture, all of those things. That's what makes faith the potent tool that we want it to be. Otherwise, it's no more than another tool for slavery. I told somebody the other day that was arguing with me from the faith perspective. I told you may as well smoke crack or drink alcohol. You're doing the same thing. It just doesn't have the same social stigma. It should, but it doesn't, because all you're doing is getting high to avoid the problem. So that's clearly not it. Organization, yes, that's the answer, you all. That's how we get where we need to be. We've got to have everybody engaged in some level of consistent practice to fight for forward progress. We will never make forward progress with only a small, minute of us willing to make any type of sacrifice. And I don't know who it is in 2026 that still doesn't understand that. So I have to believe that if you're still resisting that, it's because you don't want collective advancement. You just want individual advancement. And if that's the case, you're just the enemy. And we need to deal with you the way we deal with all our enemies. We need to organize and run you out the way, because we will get what we need. And we will start by denouncing these backward institutions that exist, like the 4th of July, the 4th of July, solely to keep us tethered to the forces that oppress our lives. So we thank you for joining us. We ask you to join us next week. We're going to have part 2 of this, July 5th. Same time, same platforms. We're going to talk about dismantling the hypocrisy of the U.S. Constitution. Everybody always talks about the Constitution. Nobody's read it. So we're going to break down some key elements, focusing on key elements of it, like the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the 13th and 14th Amendment, the 19th Amendment. That's what we're going to talk about next week. So we're going to dismantle. So join us so we can do that. The QR code in the upper left-hand corner, the red and white one, you can find out about AAPRP programs. Go to the Forward Ever shop and buy clothing to support our revolutionary Pan-African work. Hood Communist blog is there, so you want to access that. If you're here in Northern California, we invite you on Thursdays to come out to our self-defense, community self-defense classes. We're going to be there this Thursday, July 2nd. The address is 2775 Cottage Way, like cottage cheese, Cottage Way, Unit 15, 2775 Cottage Way here in Sacramento, California, 6 to 8 p.m. Come on through. It's a great experience. We're doing full martial arts sparring. We have a number of grappling people coming to help us learn how to better do that. We do a number of other things that you have to come in person to witness and participate in. So we invite you out. And then we want to put on your calendar Saturday, July 11th from 3 to 5 p.m. at the Oat Stop Center at 1721 Broadway in Oakland. 1721 Broadway in Oakland, July 11th from 3 to 5 p.m. We're going to have a follow-up event to African Liberation Day. We're calling it Meet the AAPRP, but the purpose of it is for us to go deeper in how we do more to advance our people's struggle. So if you're in Northern California, we invite you Saturday, July 11th, 1721 Broadway, Oakland, California, from 3 to 5 p.m. So come on out and check it out. It's going to be a great event. Join the APRP. Go to aprp-intl.org to join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. The QR code on the bottom right, the black and white one. Become a monthly sponsor of Burkina Books, the APRP's work in Burkina Faso and Niger. We're bringing in revolutionary literature so we can have work studies, philosophy in the Sahel region of Africa. So we ask you to become a monthly sponsor to do that. And the upper right, the QR code for my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. It's only $8. The QR code is there to the left of the book. And also, it's $5 for the digital version. It's a great organizing book, so we suggest you get it for that reason. There are plenty of reviews there. When you go on the QR code, I don't know the people. They bought the book and read it. So that's a wonderful thing. But we ask you to buy it, to start book clubs, to encourage people to order it, to call. We ask you to call your library, take you 5 minutes, ask them to order the book and put it in there. We ask you to call your local bookstores wherever you are African bookstores, progressive bookstores, ask them to order it. It's only $8. They can sell it for 10, 11, $12 and make a decent have a decent margin on there, but it will help us get the book out, and 100% of the proceeds for the book go towards the anti-fascist work that we do. I just got a call yesterday. There's anti-ICE work that's needed in this area. That's how I pay for that, is through the sale of this book. So help us do that, please. Help us build, become a part of the solution. Don't just stay a part of the problem. Forward ever, backwards never. Enjoy the rest of your day.